left Christianity and fundamentalist churches, I realized that the church and their ideology and doctrine create and indoctrinate people by how they're supposed to vote. That voting is a religious privilege and a right, a responsibility. And this isn't just at churches. This is everywhere. Religious people, specifically fundamentalist Christians, believe that voting is a God-given white person, well, mainly white male right. Remember, I grew up in Baptist churches that saw women as inferior. Somebody who did not even envision women as being desirable beyond anything besides being a wife and a mother. This is what Christianity views women as. They view men of white distinction as worthy of honor, leadership, authority. Anybody who gets between a white man's right to live his life on his terms is Satan's minion. And the sad thing about growing up in an extremely racist and polarized community in America, I was taught that what I view now as racist, homophobic, sexist, transphobic, and xenophobic was godly, natural. Imagine that. Actually, back then I couldn't imagine it. I didn't know what it was. But that's still no excuse. For all those people that were influenced by Christianity and caused harm, not knowing is not an excuse. You don't get a free pass because you didn't know what racism is. Once you turn 18, what you do or don't know is your responsibility. Educating yourself about the dangers of white supremacy, racism, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, fascism, unconstitutional and un-American ideologies dressed up as patriotism. That is our responsibility. We do not wait to be educated. We educate ourselves. I have little to no faith in the educational academic environment that we have in America. We have some of the worst education on the planet. Overpriced garbage. And you don't have to vote. We talked about this in several other videos. You don't have to vote. It's one way to share your opinions and support your causes. I have started to vote again because I've chosen to vote as a way to make change. But there are different ways to change how the world works. I mean, the civil rights would have taken centuries if we waited until people voted on it. Protesting is one of the big ways of how all of these movements that got equal rights for all kinds of people started. Protests. Protests are not the only way to do these kind of things. But it's just a way. And now there are going to be many people who leave hateful comments in the comment section about, if you're American, you should vote. That's a personal opinion. There are no laws, no expectations of anyone voting. Yeah, there are no laws, no fines, no rules that you have to vote in order to be an American citizen or to be patriotic. Now, a lot of people who vote think that that's just the only way, and that's really the only way I'm going to contribute my voice. I think that's quite sad. There's so many ways to create change beyond just voting. Now, if everyone had voted against Trump that didn't vote, he probably wouldn't be in the White House. But I can understand, sympathize, and commiserate with people why they don't vote anymore. Every single time I voted, my side never wins. And that's sad. But when change is very little to none, the people you vote for consistently never win, and nothing ever seems to rock any votes, I could understand why people just give up. If I waste 2 hours every election, I need to get something out of it at least half the time, right? Or what's the point? And they're probably right in their assumptions that no matter what you do, no matter how you vote, at the end of the day, it does not matter who's president. It really doesn't. Because the rich will get richer, the poor will get poorer, and people are going to die, because that's what happens in a nation so polarized by its own political parties. And find a way to make your voice heard. I knew a lot of people in churches that did not vote because they had other commitments. They shared their voice in different ways. They may not have been consistently a voter, and you don't have to be. And my mother said I should have been deported. A citizen born in this country, I should be deported because I don't vote. That doesn't make you any less American. Probably makes you a little bit wiser, because if you understand how politics works, your vote does not elect the U.S. president. You can have the popular vote and you still won't win the presidency. It's the Electoral College that does. Now in church, they do count votes based on votes. I find it ironic that things change and morph into less for the people, more for people in charge. And don't get me wrong, Christians will do anything to get their way. Let me explain. I was in half a dozen churches who voted for a minister, a pastor. And according to the bylaws, you have to have 85% to get this person the job. And yet, when the stronghold did not get what they wanted, they changed the church constitution, drove out people they didn't like, and took a new vote and got what they wanted. And they tore churches apart voting. Church membership, yeah, you get some perks, but it really hasn't brought any happiness into my parents' lives or anyone's lives that I've really encountered in church. And if I'm going to be a member of something, it's going to be something I don't have to pay the money in order to be a member of. I'm a member, well, I may be Democrat, but I'm not a registered voter with Democrats. I owe no loyalty to any political party. If a Democratic candidate turns out to not be friendly to gay people, I will not vote for them, even if they're a blue candidate. I'm an unregistered voter. I will never vote Republican, of course not. But I may or may not vote Democrat. There are so many lesser known candidates. I would rather vote Green, Independent, whatever. If the Democrat candidate is not good for us, I won't vote for him. Or for her. Or for them. I just won't do it. But church membership is or isn't a good thing. It's all about where and whom you are. So we know that being part of membership in a church has its perks. You can vote. You have a say in how finances are used. You can elect and choose new pastors. You have a say in how the entire church works like a business, even though they'll never admit it's a business. But how can church membership be detrimental when it fosters exclusivity, entitlement, blind conformity, leading to cliques, power struggles, and self-focused rather than other-focused ministries? If the church lacks clear vision, accountability for leadership, or becomes more about politics or consumerism than spiritual growth, creating an environment where members feel trapped, unheard, or burnt out by empty traditions. Exclusivity and division. Members can create insiders and outsiders, fostering an us versus them mentality rather than fostering an environment of inclusivity and unity. Entitlement. Members might demand things be done their way, viewing pastors as paid servants, leading to conflicts and turning giving into mere dues. Power and control. Leaders or members might misuse authority, pushing personal agendas or creating uniformity based on fear, stifling Christian freedom. Consumerism. People treat churches like businesses, leaving when dissatisfied, while churches may pander to consumers instead of focusing on mission. Unclear vision or burnout. Activities done because we've always done it without purpose or too few members doing most of the work leads to frustration, burnt out, and loss of membership. Issues with leadership and structures. What about abuse of powers? Some churches have histories of abuse, making people wary of formal commitment. Lack of accountability. This can be behavioral, internal, and financial. Unsafe churches may lack clear conduct codes, compliant processes, reporting misconduct, accessible policies, financial transparency, leaving members vulnerable, ignorant, or compliant, or confused. What about conflict with personal values, loss of autonomy? Modern culture values individualism, and church commitment can feel like a restriction of personal freedom, distraction from core faith. If a church becomes too political or focused on specific cultural battles like purity culture or sexism or homophobia, it can overshadow Christ's core teachings. Lack of authenticity, also known as being shallow. Some find former leadership and membership unnecessary and prefer to invest time and love without a formal label, fearing they'll need to move if things change. How to identify potential problems, red flags, no clear vision or purpose of activities, cliques or unhealthy power groups forming, leaders who are unaccountable or use fear tactics, a culture where members feel entitled to get their way. Focus is on pleasing consumers rather than fulfilling the Great Commission. Moving into more political activism and pushing towards political support. If you're a church with a tax exemption status, it is illegal, unprofessional, and unethical to support a particular candidate or political party. If any church tells you to vote Republican or a specific group or a specific candidate, report it to the tax exemption institution for investigation. Anyone who politically supports or gets people to be politically supportive with a clear agenda is violating tax exemption laws. The whole part about religion is to control, utilize, encapsulate growth, and how to maintain power, privilege, and being white and male. Very few churches consistently accept people whose nuclear family doesn't look like a 1950s Norman Rockwell painting. It's not a surprise that groups that are conditioned into being less accepting queer couples and queer families will probably show several red flags. Every church I've ever been in had power struggles, cliques, toxic red flags, narcissism. And it is not a surprise that they just can't help themselves. Membership, in my opinion, is something that is not necessary. In my opinion, all you should have to do is have a meeting with the pastor and the elders to prove you are a like-minded Christian person. As long as you can prove Christianity or that you are a Christian, you should have universal membership. It's like moving to a different U.S. state. You're still a citizen. Moving from one church to another, you would be a member. As long as you give money and attend, that gives you spiritual membership. Physical membership is stupid. It sounds like a white thing. It's all about greed. The only reason why churches want to know how many members they have is to boast about it, to maximize it, and to get more money and influence. That's the only reason why membership is a thing. It does wonders for people who know that this is going on, that this is how much they've grown. The problem is churches believe that growth means authenticity. It doesn't. You can have a boost of 25% membership in 2025, and they can be the worst type of people possible. In 5 years' time, the people that came into the church in Alaska when I was between the age of 6 and 15 tore the church apart. That kind of growth isn't something that was really good. And yet they dressed it up like, oh, we are growing. That growth isn't good growth. The most nicest, kindest church that I've ever been to have less than 75 people. The churches that had the most wicked people were the organized big churches, over 125 members. Mega churches, churches with 500 people. The more elaborate their church is, their auditorium is, can kind of clue you in on how authentic people probably are. And at the end of the day, I don't want to be a part of any group. I'm not even a part of the atheist group. And I'm sure there is one. I like atheism because we don't have a doctrine. We prioritize critical thinking. That's something religion just doesn't consistently support. Membership is not worth anything unless you use it wisely and don't view yourself as better than other people.